Have you ever wondered what you would do if the people who were supposed to protect you suddenly turned against you? What if the family you loved threw you into a dark, suffocating hole and sold you to strangers for a handful of silver coins?
Why kill him when we can sell him? He is our own flesh. 20 pieces of silver. Done.
But this isn't just the story of a boy betrayed by his own blood. You will see how a forgotten slave rose to command the greatest empire on earth, how he survived the darkest dungeons of Egypt, and the shocking, terrifying moment he finally came face to face with the men who tried to destroy him. If these stories connect with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. It means the world to us. Now let's begin. Long before the golden palaces of Egypt, and long before the heavy iron chains of a royal dungeon, there was a family in the sun-baked land of Canaan. The patriarch, Jacob, was an old man who had lived a life full of struggle. He had 12 sons, but his heart had always belonged to one woman. Her name was Rachel. For many agonizing years, Rachel could not have children. She watched in silent sorrow as Jacob's other wives filled the tents with sons. But Jacob loved her more than the rest, and he never gave up hope. Finally, a miracle happened. Heaven opened its doors, and Rachel gave birth to a boy. They named him Joseph. He was the absolute joy of Jacob's life, a living, breathing testament to the love of his youth. But tragedy soon struck the family. Years later, while they were traveling, Rachel went into severe, agonizing labor. In her final moments, she gave birth to a second son, Benjamin. As her soul was departing, Rachel passed away on the dusty road to Bethlehem. Jacob buried the absolute love of his life in the dirt, his heart completely shattered. From that day on, Joseph and little Benjamin, the only two sons of his beloved Rachel, became the fiercely protected center of his universe. They were all he had left of her. As Joseph grew into a striking 17-year-old young man, Jacob made a fateful decision. He wanted the entire world to know how much he cherished this boy. He wanted a visible symbol of his incredible favor. So he hired the finest weavers to create a magnificent garment. It was a long, sweeping coat, woven with the most vibrant, royal colors imaginable. It was a garment fit for a prince, not a shepherd. Jacob presented it to Joseph under the shade of their largest tent, his ancient hands trembling with pride.
"This is for you, my son. Wear it proudly. It is a symbol of my love."
Father, it is beautiful. I have never seen anything like this. I will wear it every single day.
But that beautiful coat carried a heavy, invisible price. Every time Joseph walked through the camp, the bright colors flashed against the dusty landscape, serving as a constant, blinding reminder to his older brothers. They were the ones who worked out in the scorching heat. They were the ones who managed the massive flocks, yet they were treated like ordinary workers, while Joseph paraded around like royalty. The older brothers watched from a distance, gripping their wooden staffs. The seeds of jealousy that had been planted years ago were now blooming into absolute hatred. They despised his youth. They despised his favor. Most of all, they despised the coat.
Look at him walking around like he owns the very ground we work on.
Our father treats us like strangers in our own home.
He does not lift a single finger in the fields. Let him keep wearing that coat. One day, the desert will swallow it up.
They could not even bring themselves to speak a peaceful word to him. Every interaction was laced with poison. But Joseph, young and perhaps a little naive to the deadly danger growing in his own home, continued to wear his father's gift. He had no idea that a much bigger storm was about to break, and it would start not with a weapon, but with a dream. The tension in the camp was already at a breaking point when God decided to speak to the young boy. Joseph had a dream that was so vivid, so breathtakingly real. When he woke up, his heart was racing. He was so filled with innocent wonder that he immediately ran to find his brothers as they were eating their morning meal.
You have to hear what I saw last night. We were all out in the middle of the field, tying up bundles of wheat. Suddenly, my bundle stood straight up, and then all of your bundles gathered around mine and bowed completely down to the ground.
The brothers stopped eating. The silence in the camp was deafening. They stared at the teenager in his royal coat, their faces twisting with a dark, terrifying fury. To them, this was not a divine revelation. This was an insult.
Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? Do you really think we, your older brothers, will ever bow our faces to the dirt for you?
If you believe God gives us dreams for a purpose, even when others doubt them, comment, "I trust His plan," right now. The hatred doubled that morning. They wanted to crush his spirit, to make him realize his place. But heaven was not finished. A few nights later, an even more spectacular vision flooded Joseph's mind. This time, the dream left the earth entirely and went into the starry sky. He ran to the main tent where his father Jacob was sitting alongside the angry brothers.
I had another one. It was incredible. I was looking up at the sky, and the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were all bowing down to me.
This time, even Jacob was caught off guard. The meaning was clear and terrifying. The sun and moon clearly represented the parents, and the 11 stars were his brothers. Jacob stood up, his brow deeply furrowed, feeling the dangerous energy radiating from his older sons.
Joseph, what kind of dream is this? Are you saying that your mother, your brothers, and even I will come and bow to the ground before you? You must guard your words carefully.
Jacob rebuked him to keep the peace, but deep down, the old man's heart skipped a beat. He remembered how God had spoken to his grandfather Abraham and his father Isaac. Jacob did not dismiss the vision. He kept the matter locked away in his mind, wondering what God was preparing to do. But the brothers did not wonder. They burned with bitter anger. The dreams were the final straw. They were no longer just annoyed by a spoiled younger brother. They were deeply, violently threatened by a boy who claimed that heaven itself had crowned him king. Sometime later, the older brothers took the massive flocks of sheep far away to the grazing lands near Shechem. Jacob, worrying about their safety in the wild, called for his favorite son.
Go and see if your brothers are safe, and check on the flocks. Bring word back to me.
I will go right now, Father.
Joseph wrapped his colorful coat around his shoulders and began the long journey. He searched through Shechem, asking travelers for directions, until a man told him the brothers had moved further north to Dothan. Joseph pressed on, completely unaware that he was walking directly into a trap. From a high ridge in Dothan, the brothers spotted a figure walking across the horizon. The bright colors of the coat gave him away instantly. They watched him approach, and all the years of jealousy, the anger over the dreams, and the absolute disdain for his favor boiled over into a deadly plot.
Here comes that dreamer. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. This is our chance. We are miles away from our father. Let us kill him right now and throw his body into one of these dry wilderness pits. We can say a vicious wild animal tore him to pieces. Then we will finally see what becomes of his grand dreams.
But Reuben, the oldest brother, felt a sudden strike of panic. He knew the guilt of murder would destroy their family forever. He had to think fast to save the boy's life.
No, we cannot shed his blood. We are not murderers.
Just strip him of that ridiculous coat and throw him into this deep pit alive. Let the desert deal with him.
Reuben secretly planned to sneak back later that night, pull Joseph out of the hole, and return him safely to Jacob. The brothers agreed to the compromise. As soon as Joseph reached their camp, smiling and exhausted from the journey, they surrounded him like a pack of wolves.
Brothers, I finally found you. Father sent me to.
Before he could finish, they grabbed him violently. They tore the beautiful coat right off his back, ignoring his desperate cries. They dragged him to the edge of a deep, dark cistern and threw him down into the suffocating darkness.
Please, what are you doing? I am your brother. Reuben, Judah, please do not leave me down here.
The brothers coldly walked away from the screaming pit and sat down to eat their lunch. As they chewed their bread, a long caravan of Ishmaelite traders appeared on the horizon, their camels loaded with precious spices, bound for Egypt.
What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood?
Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. We get rid of him forever, and we make a profit.
They hauled a weeping, terrified Joseph out of the pit. They traded his freedom for 20 pieces of silver. Joseph was bound in heavy chains and dragged away toward the scorching sands of Egypt, watching his brothers fade into the distance. When Reuben returned to the pit later and found it empty, he tore his clothes in absolute despair. The brothers then took Joseph's beautiful coat, slaughtered a goat, and soaked the royal fabric in thick blood. They carried the ruined garment back to Canaan and threw it at their father's feet.
We found this out in the wilderness. See if it belongs to your son.
Jacob collapsed to the floor. The sight of the blood shattered his mind. He pulled at his hair and wept with a volume that shook the entire camp.
It is my son's coat. A wild animal has eaten him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces.
Jacob put on rough sackcloth and mourned for his son for many days, refusing to let anyone comfort him. He believed his favorite son was dead, but miles away, across a brutal desert, Joseph was very much alive. The journey to Egypt was a brutal nightmare of heat, thirst, and exhaustion. Joseph was dragged into a massive, bustling slave market. He was stripped of his identity and placed on an auction block. He was purchased by a man named Potiphar, a terrifying and powerful figure who served as the captain of Pharaoh's royal guard. Joseph was taken to a magnificent Egyptian estate, a world of grand pillars, lush gardens, and immense wealth. But God had not abandoned the boy from Canaan. The Lord wrapped his favor around Joseph like an invisible shield. Everything Joseph touched turned to gold. He worked harder than any other servant. He was brilliant, honest, and wildly successful. Potiphar quickly noticed that this young Hebrew was entirely different from anyone else.
I do not know what God you serve, boy, but the blessing of heaven is clearly upon your hands.
From this day forward, you are my personal steward. You will command my entire estate. Everything I own is under your control.
Joseph went from a prisoner in chains to the absolute ruler of a massive household. Potiphar trusted him so completely that he didn't even keep track of his own money. He only cared about what food was put on his table. As Joseph grew older, he became an incredibly handsome and well-built man. And in the shadows of the beautiful estate, someone was watching him. Potiphar's wife. She desired the young Hebrew steward, and she was a woman who was used to getting exactly what she wanted. Day after day, she approached him, speaking in hushed, demanding tones.
The house is empty, Joseph. Come and sleep with me. No one will ever know.
My master has trusted me with his entire life. He has held absolutely nothing back from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?
He refused her constantly, going out of his way to avoid being in the same room. But one afternoon, Joseph entered the main house to do his work, completely unaware that she had sent all the other servants away. She trapped him in the grand hallway. She grabbed him by his heavy linen garment, her eyes wild with desperation and anger.
I said, come to bed with me.
Joseph knew that staying to argue would be his downfall. He twisted his body, slipped out of the garment, and ran out the front doors into the blinding sunlight, leaving the cloak entirely in her hands. Humiliated, rejected, and furious, she stared at the empty fabric. A wicked plan formed in her mind. She began to scream at the top of her lungs, calling the guards back to the house.
Look at what my husband has brought into our home.
This Hebrew slave came into my room to attack me. I screamed with all my might.
And he got terrified. He ran away, but he left his cloak right here beside my bed.
When Potiphar returned home and heard the venomous lie, his rage was absolute. The man he had trusted like a son had seemingly betrayed him in the worst possible way. Potiphar did not ask for a trial. He ordered his guards to seize Joseph immediately. Once again, Joseph was stripped of his position. He was dragged away from the beautiful gardens and thrown into the king's prison, a dark, damp, terrifying underground fortress where Pharaoh's political enemies were locked away to rot. The heavy iron doors slammed shut. Joseph sat in the cold, absolute darkness. He had done the right thing. He had honored God, and his reward was a cold stone floor. But the unstoppable favor of God followed Joseph straight through the prison bars. Even in the gloom, Joseph's character shone brightly. He did not sink into bitter depression. He served, he organized, and very quickly the chief warden noticed his unbreakable spirit. The warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners. Sometime later, the heavy doors opened to admit two highly important men. The chief cupbearer and the chief baker of Pharaoh's palace had angered the king, and they were thrown into Joseph's cell block. One morning, Joseph was bringing them their water and noticed both men sitting on the floor, their faces pale and stricken with terror.
Why are your faces so heavy with sadness today? We both had dreams last night. Terrifying, vivid dreams.
And there is no wise man down in this dungeon to tell us what they mean.
Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams.
The cupbearer nervously explained his vision. He saw a grapevine with 3 branches that rapidly blossomed into perfect grapes. He squeezed the grapes directly into Pharaoh's royal cup and handed it to the king.
The meaning is good. The 3 branches are 3 days. In exactly 3 days,
Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your prestigious job.
but please, when you are standing in the palace, remember me.
Tell Pharaoh I was kidnapped, and I have done nothing to deserve this hole.
Hearing the good news, the baker eagerly shared his dream. He saw 3 baskets of beautiful bread sitting on his head, but a flock of black birds descended from the sky and ate all the bread meant for the king. Joseph's face fell. The truth was heavy.
The 3 baskets are 3 days. In exactly 3 days, Pharaoh will cut off your head, and the birds will eat your flesh.
3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, it happened exactly as Joseph had spoken. The baker was executed. The cupbearer was washed. dressed in fine clothes and placed right back at the king's right hand. But as the cupbearer drank the sweet wine of freedom, he completely forgot about the Hebrew slave rotting in the dark. 2 full, agonizing years passed. Joseph remained trapped in the stone prison, but heaven was finally ready to move. And this time, God sent a dream to the most powerful man on the planet. Pharaoh tossed and turned in his royal bed. He dreamed he was standing by the Nile River. 7 fat, beautiful cows emerged from the water. But then 7 horrific, skeletal cows crawled out of the mud and violently devoured the fat cows. He woke up sweating. When he fell back asleep, he dreamed of 7 plump, healthy heads of grain being swallowed whole by 7 scorched, dead heads of grain. In the morning, Pharaoh was in complete panic. He summoned every magician, priest, and wise man in the empire. None of them could understand the terrifying visions. Standing by the throne, the cupbearer suddenly turned white. The memory of the dungeon hit him like a physical blow.
My king, I have made a terrible mistake. When I was in the prison, there was a young Hebrew slave. He told me my dream perfectly. Everything he said came true.
Bring him to me at once.
Pharaoh did not hesitate. He ordered his guards to the prison. Joseph was hauled out of the darkness, rapidly shaved, given fresh linen clothes, and rushed into the dazzling, gold-covered throne room.
I have had a dream, and no man in my kingdom can explain it.
I have heard that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it.
I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires.
Pharaoh described the starving cows and the scorched grain. Joseph stood tall, fearless before the living God of Egypt.
The dreams are one and the same. God is showing you what He is about to do. The 7 fat cows and grain are 7 years of massive, unprecedented abundance.
But the 7 thin cows are 7 years of brutal, devastating famine
that will completely wipe out the memory of the good years. You must find a wise man immediately to store grain during the good years, or this country will die.
Pharaoh looked at his advisors, then stared at the young Hebrew.
Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you.
You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only the throne itself will be greater than you.
Pharaoh took his royal signet ring and placed it on Joseph's hand. He clothed him in garments of fine, pristine linen and placed a massive golden collar of authority around his neck. The boy, who was once violently thrown into a dark pit, once sold for 20 pieces of silver and falsely forgotten in a prison, now rode in the royal chariot as second in command. Men cried out before him, "Bow the knee!" He was 30 years old. Pharaoh gave him a new name, Zephnath-Paneah. He also gave him a wife, Asenath, the daughter of an Egyptian priest. Before the years of famine arrived, she bore him 2 sons.
I will name him Manasseh, for God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. I will name him Ephraim, for God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering.
The 7 years of abundance came, just as Joseph had promised. The land produced plentifully, and Joseph gathered grain like the sand of the sea, so much that they finally stopped measuring it. The slave from the pit was now the governor of the world. Joseph had conquered Egypt, but across the burning desert, the deadly famine was about to push the very brothers who betrayed him right to his doorstep. The past was about to collide with the present, setting the stage for the greatest test of his life. If you believe God can turn your darkest pit into a palace, comment "God is faithful" down below. Thank you so much for watching the first part of this incredible journey with us. Your support truly brings these stories to life. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to see the next story. God bless.